Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat and we will get started in just a moment. Okay, so I have exactly 2 p.m. So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today for today's webinar titled Taking the Next Steps to Advance Your Career, the Whys and How-Tos of Graduate School or Postdocs. My name is Iris Wagstaff, and I am a STEM program director at the American Association for the Advancement of Science, or AAAS, which supports this Emerging Researchers National Conference in STEM, or EARN webinar. So for those of you who are not familiar with AAAS, many folks know us by Science Magazine, if you're not familiar with our other initiatives, but we actually have a family of journals, so definitely feel free to check out our other journals, to see if you may be interested in those other topic areas. So just a little bit about AAAS. We were founded in the 1800s, and AAAS is actually the largest general scientific association or organization in the world, with over 200,000 members worldwide. So our mission is simple but huge, and that is to advance science, engineering, and innovation throughout the world for the benefit of all people. And we accomplish this mission through a variety of programs, activities, and initiatives. The EARN conference is situated within our diversity, equity, and inclusion portfolio. Some other programs that are in that portfolio include Entry Point, which supports undergraduate and graduate student STEM majors with disabilities to place them in academic and industry internships over the summer. We also have our Sea Change initiative, which supports diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts at the faculty level and institutional level. And then we have our If Then ambassadors. If you were in the DC area or are in the DC area, we had an amazing weekend of events where we highlighted 125 women in STEM who serve as role models in the area of STEM, and their 3D images, their statues, are being displayed throughout the Smithsonian for the whole month of March. So definitely, if you are in the DMV, make sure you check out our If Then ambassadors. And then we also have our L'Oreal USA Fellowship for Women in Science, which is relevant to the webinar topic today. And it is a postdoctoral fellowship to support women in STEM to help them kick off their research careers. So to learn more about AAAS and these other initiatives, please visit our website and also Science Careers. So a little bit about the EARN conference. If you have not attended the EARN conference in the past, the whole goal of the EARN conference is really to help prepare a diverse global STEM workforce and to really help students hone and advance their science communication skills. The main conference activities include presentations by undergraduate and graduate school researchers to present their work in STEM areas. And they actually compete for prize money. We also have a number, anywhere from 30 to 40 professional development workshops, as well as an educational and career fair during the EARN conference. Keep a lookout for mid to late August when we will be opening registration for our 2023 conference, which will be held in Washington, DC next year. We're targeting March or April. And so we will be opening general registration as well as opening the student travel award application process, as well as the student oral and poster abstract submission process. So be on the lookout for that. Next slide, please. So now I will hand it off to our speaker for today. I'm really thrilled for our presenter today, Dr. Mary Ann Leung. She is the founder and president of Sustainable Horizons Institute. She has supported the EARN conference for many years, and she also does our presentation webinars to help students prepare to submit their oral and poster abstracts. So I will hand it off to you, Mary Ann.
Great, thank you so much, Iris, and thanks for everyone who has joined today. We're super excited that you are here to learn about kind of the ins and outs of graduate school and postdocs. So before we get started, just a few administrative details. So this webinar is scheduled as an hour long, and that includes plenty of time for questions and throughout the webinar. So we have a pretty small, intimate group here, so please feel free to ask a question verbally or put it in the chat throughout the webinar, so you don't have to wait to the end or whatnot. Sometimes it's just easier to, while you're thinking about it and we're talking on a subject, to ask the question, so please feel free to do that. You know, as I'm so glad that, you know, Iris has already welcomed you to introduce yourself in the chat. If you want to share, you know, your video, feel free to do that too, because we're just a nice small group here, and this webinar is designed to help you. So, so we want to do whatever we can to answer your questions and help you along your path. So just to give you a little background on myself as to kind of why I am presenting on this topic. I was previously and currently still associated with the Department of Energy Computational Science Graduate Fellowship program. I was a fellow in that program, so it supported me through graduate school, and also was lucky to have been asked to come back and serve as the program manager. And related to that, I was an invited speaker many times at the National Academy's Fellowship Roundtable, which is a group of people that all run these fellowships, and we talk about grad school and careers and whatnot. And then more recently, about 7 years ago, I founded a nonprofit organization that's focused on workforce development and diversity and inclusion. So we're all about helping people develop their careers. And so super happy to be here to talk with you a little bit about graduate school and postdocs. So you're all somewhere in your career, and you know, one of the things that I like to talk about with people when they're considering the subject of this webinar is kind of like, where are you now? Where are you headed? What is your path going to look like? Because the answer to those questions will really direct your, you know, how you make decisions about grad schools and postdocs. So the agenda for today is I'm going to start out with a few questions just so we can kind of get to know who you are, and you can get to know who else is on the webinar. And then we'll talk a little bit about why you should consider attending graduate school or pursuing a postdoctoral opportunity. And then kind of how to find the right program for you. And a little bit about navigating that process of you know, getting into grad school or securing a postdoc, and then a little bit about how to be successful in that process. So I'm going to start out with a poll. So Iris, if you could drop the link to the poll in the chat, I'm going to go over here, and there is this poll that I have opened, which you can just answer this first question. So you go to this URL, pollev.com/MaryAnnLeung407, and then you enter in your answer. Or else you can text your answer as well. So you text this, kind of follows the instructions. Text Marianne Leon 47 to this number, and then you enter in your answers. So just let me know what your current status is. I'll give you a second to get logged into the poll. There'll be a few questions here that we'll ask you. So far it looks like we have doctoral students. Okay, now we're getting some more answers, an undergrad as well. So just try to go to that link. Like I say, if you're on your phone, you can click on the link or else use your text to let us just know where you are kind of in your academic career right now. So just trying to get a feel for who's out there, and so we can, make sure we customize the discussion. So most of all of the material that I have prepared for today can be applicable to whether you're applying for grad school or for a postdoc. And I do have a few areas where it's kind of specialized. So it's just as helpful for me to know who's out there, and so that I can kind of customize this more towards, because so far it looks like we have more doctoral students, so probably people interested in postdocs. And I see we do definitely have some undergrad master students, so we can definitely talk about grad school as well. So just giving you another minute to enter in your answers. Okay, all right, so that is, so now that gives me a good idea. So we'll try to make sure, like I say, we'll cover both grad school and postdocs, but looks like what we have is more people interested in postdocs. Okay, so then the next question that I have for you is just kind of, hey, how are you doing out there? I know everyone is, been living on Zoom for their academic life and professional life. So how are you doing today? Just a simple question. So this, you can just type in an answer and some kind of word or a couple words, and your responses will show up here on there. Oh, okay, so someone's in finals. So thank you for making time for this while you're in finals, and we got good. So this is a word cloud. So you can see when there's multiple people that put in the same response, the word gets bigger. So we definitely understand we have busy people who are doing, looks like pretty good, and we still have some people in finals. So just checking in with you guys to see how it's going. Like, I know it's, hopefully you're kind of getting used to this virtual life, and we'll create a new normal. And I think there are, believe it or not, lots of benefits to being able to connect virtually. So, okay, good. All right, let me go ahead. Okay, good, excited. I like to see that. I'm excited too to share this information with you, and hope that you can get something out of this webinar. And really the best way to do it is if you guys really participate and interact and let me know what you need to know about this topic and what questions you're thinking about. What's on your mind? I want to hear about that. Okay, so here's another question. It's again a word cloud, so you can put in whatever you like. So what have you learned since the pandemic? Some of what you've learned, potentially really has an impact on this topic as well. Hopefully if you're going to be applying for a postdoc or a grad school, you'll be there in person, but there's a lot of things to learn. So I like this consistency, teleworking, that is becoming more and more a thing of the future. I know a lot of people who are in organizations that are taking postdocs, that are being allowed that opportunity to telework. There are different advantages and disadvantages to that, and it's good for us to all explore. I know lots of people are working on this. So look at that. We've learned about resilience. Isolation is definitely, I know, a side effect of this, and we have to learn ways to keep ourselves from you know, suffering from isolation. You know, sometimes isolation is good because it gives you the time to focus, but then of course, sometimes it's not so great. So anyways, very nice. So Zoom, I think we're all living on Zoom. So very good. Okay, thank you so much for sharing that, your thoughts about what you've learned so far. The next question is about what your career plans are. Okay, so you're considering, you know, grad school presumably, or a postdoc. What do you think you want to do eventually? So ultimately, where do you think you want to go? Or okay, so there's kind of get a job in industry, get a tenure track position in academia, a research position, a government lab. Teaching is another option. Of course, there's lots of other opportunities as well. And I know Iris has organized, and I've helped with some webinars on different alternative careers, as well as kind of the classics that we're looking at here. So, so very good. So it looks like we've got people interested in industry, academia tenure track, academia research track. Looks like it's quite popular, which is another great way to pursue a career and continue doing the exciting work of research. Government labs are also a wonderful place as well to try to work. Okay, so now we're seeing more changes in the numbers. Okay, all right. Okay, all right, very good. Thank you so much for sharing that. It looks like we've settled down on our answers. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to my slides. Let's see. I'll just give me a second here to bring them back up again. Okay. All right, so that's the poll for now. So now we're going to kind of start talking about the kind of the benefits or the why you should try to continue your education or training through either graduate school or postdoc. And so, you know, we just had this question of what you want to do in your career. So you might already have a great image of your future, but a lot of people maybe not so sure and want to explore. So if you're in that latter category, how can you try to figure that out? So, you know, this might seem a little elementary, but you know, what are the kinds of things you can do with a STEM career? Of course, it depends on which, you know, sector of STEM you're in. Of course, ERN covers all the areas, but you know, there's quite a diversity of things, whether you want to be a zoologist, a wildlife biologist, a microbiologist, a network or computer systems administrator, or an architect, or a health and safety engineer. So all of these are all different ways that you can have a really wonderful career in STEM. And of course, what I'm trying to, you know, get you to think about is like, think about where you want to go and what is interesting to you and what would make sense for your own personality style. So I've led some workshops where we do these kind of personality tests, so you can try to see what, you know, what kind of traits are, you know, are part of who you are, and then you can try to use that information to match it up with kind of types of professions that would make sense for you given your skill sets. Laboratory technician is another, you know, meaningful one. So another thing that I encourage you to think about is so first of all, maybe you can think about in terms of like positions or titles or, you know, whatnot. But also you might want to think about what kind of work, you know, again, thinking about what makes you happy and what you enjoy doing. For instance, do you want to be a leader, or do you want to be in charge? Do you want to like lead a whole team or a whole organization? Or do you want to design the work, or do you want to kind of follow the work of someone else's design? Do you want to contribute to a team, or do you like kind of working on your own more? Do you want to conduct research, or are you kind of more of a, you know, person who likes to teach? want to, share knowledge and help other people learn. If you want to teach, what level do you want to teach at? High school, college, university, community college. Of course, there's all different levels of teaching, and teaching can be an extremely rewarding career and something great to do with a STEM degree. Are you really interested in discovering new science? So one of the things that is very exciting about working in science or in STEM in general is, coming up, discovering things that nobody knows about, or designing new, robots or new solutions to problems. So the process of discovery is something else that's important. Maybe you like to write. There's a lot of writing positions related to STEM, and that could be writing for the media or writing stories, being a science writer. AAAS has a lot of opportunities to explore science writing. Of course, they do a tremendous amount of very important work in terms of communicating about science. There's also writing where you want to document procedures or manuals or things like that, or regulations in terms of the different regulatory agencies. And maybe you want to affect change. So maybe you want to see things that have impacts on society, whether that's through your research or through your work that you do. For instance, myself, I have a training background in computational chemistry, but now I'm doing work which affects the kind of the workforce and promoting diversity and inclusion. So there's a lot of different things that you can do with your degree. And I think what I'm trying to say is that the most important first step is to kind of think about yourself and what you want to do. And that can impact what you want to, what kind of decisions you should make about your career and whether you should continue on with your education. Helping others is another opportunity that is very appealing to a lot of people that you have the opportunity to do with a STEM career. Another thing to kind of consider is what kind of work environment you want to work in, whether you want to have fixed and regular hours, or whether you want to have a flexible schedule. So that would kind of be the opposite, right? So for example, in academia, that's where people tend to have the most flexible schedules. So you have to teach, maybe so many courses, a week, and that's, gives you just a certain number of hours where you have to work. But other than that, your schedule is quite flexible, depending on, committee meetings and whatnot. Whereas in some places, like in industry and in many of the government labs, you tend to have more kind of regular hours, holidays, time off, things like that. There's a lot of debate about where the best place is to have work-life balance. I know lots of places in the government labs and industry, as well as academia, support policies that will make that easier. Another thing to consider is about whether you want to, kind of follow the traditional model, which is being an individual investigator, or whether you want to be a part of a team. So for instance, it's changing, of course, still, but in academia, the model has always been very much to have an individual investigator bringing in their own grants, and then supporting their students and postdocs. So you're kind of like your own CEO of your research enterprise, where if you work in industry and in government, you tend to be more on a team environment. Now, this is just generalization. Of course, you find plenty of individual investigators in those places, and you also find lots of teams in academia, but those are kind of traditionally more what you'll find is more likely. And then again, whether you want to be in a small organization or a larger organization, and how entrepreneurial do you want to be? Do you want to really, kind of be the person coming with all the ideas and leading things and running the show, or are you interests? Are you happy to be on a team and, you know, let other people lead, or, and, you know, and you be a contributor, or maybe sometimes you lead and sometimes you don't. You know, there's all these different things that affect the work environment that that you may ultimately work in. And then we also, you know, related to that is kind of the sector that you want to work in. Having an idea of where you want to go helps you also, you know, just make these decisions about graduate school and postdocs, as well, not just whether you should go or not. And then it's like also kind of dictates your pathway there and the things that you want to do as well. So that's another area that I think is really important to consider. So, and here's another thing that is, I think, is people sometimes you don't like really, you know, get a chance to talk about this, but what's really important to you? What is valuable to you? Is it making a lot of money, which is absolutely a valuable thing? You know, maybe that's you want to discover something and have a patent and make a ton of money off of that, or you want to be the CEO of a new tech company. Is it prestige or independence? You know, just the ability to discover things and have challenging work, or, you know, have a work-life balance, to be able to really balance having a family and doing other outside activities as well as your work. So these are all important questions that you should be asking yourself when you're thinking about moving forward with what direction you want to go to. So so I'm going to pause for a minute just to see if there's any questions with what we've covered so far, because I'm going to start transitioning kind of into a new area. And I'm not, I don't know if there's anything in the chat. I'm not seeing anyone raising their hands, but feel free to ask a question if you want, or you something like you're thinking about this. Not seeing anything so far, so I'll just go ahead and keep on continuing. So thinking about the questions that I have raised so far, what your future goals are, kind of really give you an indication of kind of what education or training you need, okay? So there are some positions where that require certain degrees. If you're going to be more at a kind of technician level, then a bachelor's degree or a master's degree is sufficient. Whereas if you want to be more of a principal investigator, if you want to be a professor at a university, you know, basically, you know, doing kind of more high-level research or leading teams, then you will be required to have a PhD. And I just want to say, for the people who are not in doctoral programs already, you know, the undergrads and the master's students, I know one time, quite a long time ago, when I was an undergrad, I was talking with someone about this whole idea of whether or not to go to grad school. And she told me something which I thought was quite funny, but I think it was quite wise. And it was that, you know, she said, a PhD is your union card. It basically gives you a license to do research. So, and not just research, actually, to do all kinds of things. So this woman was a PhD chemist, and she had done research, but she was working at one of the government regulatory agencies, and what she was doing was writing, you know, regulations and documentation and all this sort of thing. But she had to have a PhD to do this, and it was important to go through the training, to go through that process to learn how to learn, because that's really what you teach. The biggest thing that you learn when you do a PhD, hopefully, is not just a lot of information about a particular area. It's also about you learn how to discover things, how to learn things that no one knows things about. So it's certainly, you know, what they call a soft skill that's quite important, which led her to the opportunity to do lots of other things. so that, depending on what you want to do, it really is just the license to get in the door a lot of times. And then regarding postdocs, again, that kind of becomes a license to do the work, and it's more training, but it does give you the opportunity to really do training rather than step into all the responsibilities. And it varies quite a lot by field. I know in many of the biology fields, there are people who do multiple postdocs, maybe postdoc for a total of 8 years or something like that. Whereas in computer science, people hardly ever do postdocs. They go directly into faculty positions or research positions or whatnot. And so that's a really important factor. And one thing to consider if you're thinking like, wow, this is a lot of training and a lot of education that I have to go through, that's true, but it also is, in a certain way, it's really a blessing, and it really is an opportunity for you to really take advantage of the opportunity to be in that position. So for example, when you're in graduate school, I was told that when you're doing your doctoral work, that it's kind of like the peak of your intellectual career in a certain way, because you can totally focus on the science, and that in your whole life is all about the science and discovery and these kinds of things. And that's quite a luxury. As you get further down the road on your career, you'll find that there'll be all these other additional responsibilities that you start getting. The same is generally true for a postdoc as well. Again, in a postdoc, you're really an opportunity where you can focus on the science. Maybe you'll start getting involved in other activities, more so than grad school. But again, it's an opportunity for you to really train yourself and potentially to get certain skills under your belt that you didn't get when you're in grad school. So when you're a postdoc, I know that it's changing a little bit now, that it's more a lot of times people really expect you in a postdoc to already have the skills, but you should hopefully be able to have the opportunity to also broaden your skill set when you're in your postdoc. So that's a really good reason to do a postdoc. And to be quite honest, my thesis advisor had told me that I should go and do something like really different for my postdoc after grad school, because of exactly that reason. Because you can have a career, it may not be clear to you at where you are now, but you can have a career where you really work on lots of different problems over the span of your career. And the only way that you can do that is if you learn how to jump into a new field and learn enough about it and get it productive and up and running very quickly. And very often it really is, that's where fresh ideas and innovation comes from. It's by someone with a different perspective, different eyes, looking at the same problem that lots of people have been looking at for years. And this is kind of a really nice example that I like to use to say why it's important to have diversity, and diversity from all different levels. So one is just a new, fresh perspective because you've expanded your research into a new area. So so that's a little bit kind of a summary of like why maybe you should consider, and so what I'm saying is that one reason is looking at where you want to go, what are the requirements, and the other is opportunities to basically really develop your portfolio and your skill set so you can have a really exciting and successful career. Okay, so next we're going to talk about a few myths and facts about grad school and postdocs. And so we're going to go back to the poll. So let's see if I can, go back to the poll. So the poll is still open. So you can, hopefully you still have that open. And here is the first question. So, so here, is this a myth or a fact? I should complete a master's degree before I apply for a doctoral program. True or false? So far we got a false coming up. So just go ahead and complete the poll. Is this true that you need a master's before you complete a doctoral? True or false? Okay, so it seems like everyone so far is thinking that this is true. I should complete a master's degree before I apply for a doctoral program. Sorry, everyone thinks this is false. And actually, that, in my opinion, that is correct. Of course, things vary from different disciplines, but a lot of people think that they should get a master's degree before applying for a doctoral. And that is not really true. In most fields, you can apply directly into a doctoral program after your undergrad. And I know a lot of people don't feel confident enough to go forward with a doctoral program, or maybe they don't want to commit to the doctoral program, and I completely understand that. But you know, if you're able to, it's a way to shorten that time frame of the time to your final degree and time to your final place where you're in a position you're no longer training and you have it. So I do encourage people to skip the master's degree if they don't feel really like they need to do that. The other thing about the difference between the master's degrees and doctorals is that very rarely do you get funding for master's degrees, but very often that's the case for a doctoral. So here's another one, true or false. Graduate school is expensive. What do you think? Is this true or false? Okay, good. So we have about a 60-40. Oh, no, 50-50. I'll let you guys answer. We'll see where we fall. Okay, so. All right, so it looks like we're stabilized on our answers so far, and we're pretty close here. And I guess maybe it's sort of a trick question, because it sort of is true and sort of is not. You know, if you look at tuitions for school, depending on what school you go to, of course, the tuition and fees and whatnot can be quite expensive. But in most cases, certainly when you're doing a PhD program, you will find that you can get funding to pay for your tuition and provide a stipend for you so that you have some living expenses as well. So that's another thing that sometimes people are not aware. So you don't have to finance graduate school. And this is one thing that is kind of the difference between going to grad school and going into technical programs such as medical school or pharmacy. Those things rarely do you get paid to go to complete those degrees, and you do have to pay a lot of money for those. Okay, so the next question is, how about this one? A postdoctoral position can lead to a permanent position elsewhere or at the same institution. And this is true or false? So postdocs can lead to permanent positions elsewhere or at the same institution. Okay, so we've still got some answers coming in, so I'll let you kind of think about that one. Okay, so looks like we've stabilized on our answers. So again, I think this is, I kind of have this question as a point of discussion. So I think In some cases it can, and in some cases it can't. And that's something that you might want to really think about when you're applying for positions. So let me talk through a scenario here. So let's say your situation is you want to be a tenure track professor at Harvard University. So a very prestigious place, hard position to get and whatnot. And so what's going to be really important for you along that pathway is, you know, what you rack, kind of all the things that you rack up on your CV, right? So you had a prestigious fellowship and it was at a prestigious organization, and, you know, and so on and so forth. And you got, you know, a paper in Science magazine that AAAS publishes and things like that. So these are all the kinds of things that you will need in order to accomplish something like becoming a tenured professor at Harvard University. And so how does that relate to this question? Well, maybe it doesn't matter to you whether or not this position at this postdoc you take is going to lead to a postdoc at that institute or a permanent position at that institution, but you take it because it's extremely prestigious, right? So then that would, you know, influence your search and your application process for what kind of postdoc you want to take. Maybe it turns out you don't want to be a tenured professor at Harvard, but you want to have a really rewarding career in research, and you want to maybe not have to jump around so many times. So sometimes people do multiple postdocs. So then it might be more important for you to look at a place and apply somewhere where a postdoc will lead, or you know, not you know, guaranteed, but it's more likely to lead to a permanent position at that organization. So I am aware of certain laboratories where that's the case. They actually have designed into their programs pathways for people who want to come in after completing a doctoral degree, do a postdoc, and then if they, you know, do well, you know, it's mutually agreeable on both sides, they have a pathway to a permanent position. And so that way it kind of shortens your kind of temporary moving around the country kind of, or moving around the world kind of situation. And so that's what's really important to kind of consider here about postdocs. And you know, for grad school, you know you're going to have to go somewhere else, but for a postdoc, this kind of question I think is an important one for you to think about and ask yourself. Okay, so here's a question. My advisor will place me in the best postdoc position possible. What do you think? Is this true or false? So we got a false for sure coming on in, and then let's see if does everyone think that's true? I'm sorry, everyone thinks it's false. So, well, so it seems like, I don't know if everyone is just completely sure of this, but we don't have much variance on this. And I would say that yes, generally this is false. Although, you know, again, a lot of times the advisor will place you in a really great position, but I think it's not fair to assume that that's going to happen. So it used to be the case that your advisor was really, I mean, there was this whole, you know, academic lineage where people, the only way you got somewhere was through your connections, through your advisor. And we are, of course, moving away from that. So that is still potentially a really great viable path. But there are lots of other ways to find good postdocs. And it does take some effort and some work to make that happen. Let's see. So the institution is the most thing to consider for grad school or a postdoc. So being at the most prestigious institution, is that the most important thing? So which institution you select. So you know, if you're lucky, you applying to grad school or applying for postdocs and you get multiple acceptances, is the institution going to be the most important thing for you to consider? And what is my answer going to be? You're probably getting the hang of it so far. Like, what am I saying? Well, it kind of depends on where you're going, right? But the point is, you should ask yourself this question, right? If you want to, if you're aspiring to be a tenured faculty professor at one of the most prestigious institutions out there, then probably what the institution is going to be really important. But you know, it depends on where you're going. But I would say that in terms of yeah, so it depends again on where you think you're trying to go. And then here's another question kind of related. The relationship with your advisor or mentor is the most important thing to consider. So do you think that is true? Or, you know, this is kind of in conflict to the last question. Is this going to be important for you to consider? So this would be your advisor or mentor, either in grad school or for your postdoc. Is this true or false? Is that really, really important? So, so it's interesting to see where we're at, and I think this is kind of stabilized on answers. I would say for graduate school, the advice that I got was that your advisor is the #1 most important thing to consider, because you're going to spend a lot of time with this person. If you're doing a doctoral program, you are going to spend anywhere from 4 to 6 or more years with this person, and it's really important for you to get along. So you know, just like be able to work together, but also intellectually, you know, you want to be excited about the work and be able to express yourself intellectually and to you know, to blossom and grow. So I would say that this is really, really important, especially for graduate school, but also true for your postdoc, because you're still in training, so you need to be learning with that person. And for the postdoc, it's maybe kind of not quite as much important as when you're in grad school, because you will presumably start establishing yourself within the organization and within your field. That's what you're doing as a postdoc. And so you're getting more independence from that advisor. But again, it is going to always be important. So I think the point is to think about that person who you think you're going to be working with when you go into these fields. Okay, I believe that is the last of the questions. I'm going to go back to the slides and go from there. Let's check my time. Yeah, so finding the right, oh, let me see, I probably have to do this too. There we go. So finding the right program and advisor. This is kind of a summary of the kinds of things that you want to consider. You know, how do you actually find that person? If you know, hopefully you get some help from your current advisors or you know, professors or people that you're already in your network. But you know, if you might need to go out and do some searching yourself. And so kind of like what are you interested in, and who's doing that kind of work are the kinds of things that I suggest that you look at. How important is the prestige of the institution that we talked about? In terms of graduate programs, you know, what are the program requirements? And when I went out to interview at different grad schools, I found that it varied widely about how many hoops they ask you to jump forward through until you advance to candidacy is something that really varies widely. And basically, there's some programs that are kind of designed to weed people out. But then there's other programs which are designed to really help you to make sure that you get through all the rigors of graduate school. So those are things that you might want to consider as well. And then, as I mentioned about compatibility with your advisor and mentor is really important. So how to find them, you know, talk to your current advisors and mentors, professors, Hopefully you're reading some research papers and you look at, maybe there's an author that is doing interesting work, attending conferences and meetings, going and really engaging and finding out what, who's doing what interesting work, and doing, the networking, attending ERN, maybe you'll find your future advisor there. And then of course, doing a lot of searching through the internet is all ways that you can find out who your next program and mentor is going to be. So in terms of navigating the process, I kind of outlined here grad school track and the postdoc track. There are, of course, applications that you have to fill out. And like I say, even if this is something that a lot of people don't do, which I think is really important. If you're applying to, an application that's just you found out about or whatnot, it's really important to actually make personal contact with people at that organization, preferably the hiring manager. And there's this old term called cold calling, which is, just calling up someone or writing to someone who you don't know, but you're interested in their work. And it really makes a huge difference because it'll help you stand out, because you never know how many applications they're going to be receiving, but having a connection with someone. I know when I was applying for grad school, I was really interested. I did, as I was advised to do, as I looked and found people that were doing interesting work. And then I just wrote to them and say, hey, I think your work is really interesting. I'm going to be applying for grad school. And people responded and talked to me and whatnot. And then it gives you the opportunity to figure out whether or not you really want to work with them, right? Because remember, you're really in the driver's seat just as much as anyone else. So try doing that. If you get invited to go to school visits, it's really important to meet with all these potential advisors. And really important is meet with the grad students and find out if they're happy in that program. That was an advice that I got that was like so valuable, because when I went on these visits, to some very prestigious organizations, I found out all the grad students were really unhappy because it's just a culture which wasn't, so great. And for me, I made the choice I wasn't willing to go into that kind of environment and whatnot. If you're going for a postdoc and you haven't done this before, be aware that you're likely to be asked, sometimes they'll do a telephone interview first. And so you definitely want to make sure you're prepared for that, do the research, think about the kind of questions that they're going to ask you. And the other thing that people don't really think a lot about is when you have an interview, whether you're going to grad school or for a postdoc, you want to make sure you have your list of questions for them. One, to show them that what you know and that you're, proactive in that way, and to get your questions answered so you can decide whether that's going to be a good fit for you or not. But you definitely want to prepare in all these ways as well. And when you go on a postdoc, you're often, have to give a talk. Obviously, you want to rehearse that and be very well prepared, be prepared for questions. You're likely to have what I consider a pretty rigorous schedule, which is, you might give a talk and then meet, have these 15 or 20 or 30-minute meeting with a bunch of people over a day. And then some of those meetings are going to be in social settings like over lunch or dinner. So, you need to be prepared for that. And of course, in both cases, you want to be able to be prepared to negotiate your offer, because there's always room for negotiation, and you want to make sure that you're prepared and you understand what the parameters are. And so that's doing some research on the particular opportunity that you're working with. And remember that you're interviewing them to see if it's going to be a good fit for you and whether you'll be happy there. So some typical kind of components of applications, obviously forms, transcripts, GREs for grad school, essays. So it's really important to take a lot of care in your essays and your reference letters. And obviously, of course, make sure that you don't miss any deadlines if you're applying for positions that have deadlines. In terms of how you can be successful, I would say that what's really important is to create a compelling story that's evidenced through your application materials, your interest in the research, excitement for it, any curricular, extracurricular activities, and your potential as a grad student or postdoc and future member of the scientific community. Here's a few resources for the art of procuring reference letters and keeping notes about yourself and preparing for your dream job and requesting letters of recommendations. So I know we're pretty close to being out of time, so I'll just mention a few upcoming webinars. One is another webinar that I will be giving on applying for fellowships. So if you're going to grad school or a postdoc, having a fellowship is quite advantageous. So there's a webinar all about that. And then AAAS will be also having a panel of fellowship providers, which will be super useful as well. So we can, Iris, should we take some questions or do you want to try to wrap up? Okay, so does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, we have one. I answered it, but you may want to add more to it about opportunities for international students. And I just responded that that's specific to the graduate school or the postdoc program. But, definitely if that is your interest, you would need to target those opportunities that support international students. And it should be listed with the criteria or eligibility information. But in case you wanted to add anything else to that.
No, that was perfect. That was a perfect answer. So that's great. Thank you for answering that. What other questions do people have? So are you going to apply? Are you going to go to grad school? Are you going to go for a postdoc?
Feel free to turn your camera on and ask a question, or you can answer in the chat. Are any of you applying right now for graduate school or postdocs, or you just mainly getting information on the process? Anyone?
Anyone? You could raise your hand if you're planning on applying to grad school or a postdoc.
So Jasmine responded, getting information on the process. Anybody else? Information on the process. So you all are great that you're starting early. You definitely need to start as early as possible, taking a gap year, mainly getting information on the process. We're applying to a postdoc, definitely. And I also dropped some resources in the chat for you that include the National Postdoc Association, the Graduate Research Fellowship Program. Some of these were mentioned on the last webinar that Marianne did for us, which was a great webinar on fellowship opportunities. Definitely a way to fund graduate school. And just drop some resources from NSF and AAAS who support this webinar series. Yeah, I know what was important for me many years ago in graduate school was funding. So, in addition to, having a match as far as, an advisor that you think you can work with, having interest in research that you're interested in, I was definitely interested in funding. So if you missed our webinar on February 24th, definitely revisit, view that recording. You can go to our website. Dr. Leung, she gave some really great information on how to fund your academic career. So, and she discussed fellowships and other opportunities, but that was very important to me, in addition to finding the right fit and definitely finding a supportive team. So when you're in graduate school, you'll have a committee, a team of people that, they are the gatekeepers. They decide if you move forward or not. So I think it's really helpful to do like informational interviews with current graduate students in those programs so they can really talk frank with you and give you the layout of the land. So that is definitely important. And that's something that you can do now. You don't have to wait to start, reaching out to current graduate students, because you want to know what the environment is and the atmosphere and the culture in that lab as well as that department.
Absolutely, great.
So any other questions? Did anybody want to ask a question or put a question in the chat before we close? Comments, questions? Okay, so I did drop the survey link in the chat. Please make sure to complete that before you leave. We'll also be sending that via email. So just wanted to thank you all for joining us. For more information about the EARN conference, please visit our website. I did drop the link for you to register for our upcoming webinars as well. And definitely please follow us on social media. And thank you so much for a great presentation. Again, we are looking forward to the next presentations on March 24th and April 13th. So the EARN conference, we don't have a date or location yet. We are in the process of reaching out to hotels now. Hopefully by the end of April, we'll have a save the date posted, but we will be targeting opening the registration process and application process for student travel awards and to present oral and poster presentations probably mid-August. And again, we're always targeting the Washington, D.C. area for the conference, anywhere between February, March, and April of next year. So we'll definitely be posting that information, hopefully by the end of April. We'll have the save the date, but definitely just keep visiting our site, our website.
It's a fantastic conference. I look forward to going to it every year, and I hope to see some of you there.
Yes. Okay, if there are no questions, thank you all for joining us, and definitely hope you can join us for an upcoming webinar on March 24th. And let me just drop that information again in the chat. If you missed that, you can go ahead and register for our March 24th and April 13th webinars. I will go ahead and drop that in the chat again for you if you missed that. Okay, thank you all for joining us and have a great day.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.